What is up, and welcome back to Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. As always, I am your host, Brandon Silvers, talking a little college football history today in a brand new series that I'm doing. Hope you have been well. Let's get into it. All right. A lot of the enjoyment I get from doing this podcast is the research aspect, which leads me down incredible rabbit holes of sports trivia. So I thought, why not share that with you? Because I can't be the only one who enjoys that. So I'm going to do that in a new series that I'm calling Beyond the Box Score. Let me know how you like it. Let me know if you have any deep dives that you do or you want me to do. But yeah, here we go. So, before the ESPN magazine cover in a wedding dress next to Mike Ditka, before the social anxiety-induced interviews wearing his football helmet, before the suspension for weed, before the early retirement to travel the world and smoke weed, among other things, I guess, and before the return from all that to resume his NFL career, Ricky Williams was atop the college football world. His 1998 Heisman winning season started off slow for his Texas team. They were coming off a 4-7 season and had a new coach in Mack Brown. A Week 3 blowout loss to Kansas State saw Ricky finish with just 43 yards rushing. He was coming off a 5th place finish in the Heisman race the year before, but it looked like another losing season was in the works, and as a result, another year of watching someone else take home college football's top individual award. But then Ricky would have perhaps the best back-to-back weeks in college football history. Over those 2 weeks, Ricky rushed for a combined 668 yards and 11 touchdowns as the Longhorns drilled Rice and Iowa State, reigniting their season and Ricky's Heisman hopes. He's still the only player to have back-to-back 300-yard games. By the time the season was over, Ricky was indeed the runaway winner of the Heisman, as well as college football's all-time leading rusher, as Texas lost just one more game the rest of the way to finish 9-3. That loss was a 42-35 thriller against Texas Tech that saw the teams combine for 36 fourth quarter points. In that game, Ricky Williams carried the ball 30 times for 141 yards and a touchdown. Also in that game, Ricky Williams carried the ball 31 times for 148 yards and a touchdown. That's right. There were 2 Ricky Williamses, and on that November day in 1998, the lesser-known Ricky and his team prevailed. I learned of this second Ricky's existence when researching the greatest passers in Texas Tech history with the program's history of ridiculous passing numbers that deserve an episode of its own. I got curious what their leading rushers list looked like. Sitting at 4th on their all-time rushing list, just ahead of former NFL player Bam Morris, was this familiar name in an unfamiliar place. He was a sophomore during this showdown with Heisman Ricky, and they had actually faced off the year before. Texas Tech won that one as well, with Red Raider Ricky running for 80 yards and a touchdown in a 24-10 victory. Heisman Ricky had 131 yards and no touchdowns in a losing effort in that one. Red Raider Ricky ran for 894 yards that freshman year, then followed it up with an incredible 1,582-yard and 13 touchdown season in 1998. This was the Spike Dykes era of Texas Tech football, and back then they were known for their prolific running backs. Williams had followed Byron Hanspert, whose 2,000-yard season earned him a 6th place finish in the Heisman race in 1996, and Hanspert had followed Bam Morris, who closed out his Red Raider career with a 22-touchdown season. They remained 2nd and 5th on Tech's all-time rushing list, and James Gray, who was a freshman when Dykes took over in 1986, is 3rd. As crazy as it seems to me now, this was a Red Raiders program known for running the ball. This Ricky Williams seemed like a solid contender to at least earn an invite to the Heisman ceremony as a junior. Unfortunately, in the first game of that junior season, Ricky suffered a season-ending knee injury. When he returned for the 2000 season, Dykes was gone, and in his place was first-year head coach Mike Leach, aka the reason we all think of Texas Tech as a high-powered passing program. How different were things? Up to that point of Williams' career, he had not played with a quarterback who had thrown for 1,700 yards or even 10 touchdowns. Year one under Mike Leach saw sophomore quarterback Cliff Kingsbury throw for over 3,400 yards and 21 touchdowns. All this passing meant Ricky's role changed. In his monster second year, Ricky ran the ball 306 times, averaging almost 28 carries per game. He reclaimed his starting spot for 2 seasons after his injury and ran a combined 269 times in those 2 seasons, just under 12 times per game. But Leach found another role for the 5'7", 195-pound Williams, receiving threat out of the backfield. In his first season under Leach, Ricky caught nearly twice as many passes as he'd caught his first 2 seasons combined, but that was nothing compared to his final year in Lubbock. With Kingsbury leading the nation in completions and attempts, Ricky Williams was 3rd in the country with 92 receptions. Despite his success, Ricky Williams went undrafted in the 2002 NFL Draft. The New Orleans Saints hilariously signed him as an undrafted free agent about 6 weeks after trading Heisman Ricky Williams to the Dolphins. However, they made sure neither Ricky Williams played for them that year as they traded him to the Colts right before the season started. Red Raider Ricky played 2 seasons for the Colts as a backup before his career ended. And yeah, that was that. Now, would you believe it? There was another even more productive same-name duo from this era that I'm aware of. Let's talk about the Adrian Petersons. You know the main one, the man they call all day, ran for nearly 15,000 yards in his NFL career, including coming just 9 yards shy of breaking Eric Dickerson's single-season record less than a calendar year after tearing his ACL. Now we know him more for his legal issues, unfortunately, including his mid-career scandal for child abuse, but this guy was the LeBron of football coming out of high school. In fact, when LeBron's old friend Maurice Clarett was challenging the NFL's rule that a player must be 3 years removed from high school to enter the draft, there was a lot of talk about whether any high school players could make the leap, and the name that came up the most was Adrian's. And for good reason. He was the consensus #1 recruit in the nation coming out of high school because he was a grown-ass man. 6'2", 210 with a 4.4 40 time. I'm 4 years younger than him, and I remember looking at him and thinking that my puberty was a scam. I couldn't have been the only one feeling that way because he showed up to the U.S. Army All-American game and made the best football players high school had to offer look silly. He gets to an Oklahoma program that had finished no worse than 6th in the country the previous 4 seasons, and he's not only their best player right from the jump, but arguably the best player in all of college football. He finished 2nd in Heisman voting to Matt Leinart, but probably would have won, except he was split in first place votes with his own quarterback Jason White, and there was a lot of talk about how a freshman shouldn't win the award by those old school sports writers who were voting for the award. Now, Oklahoma did get blown out by Leinart's Southern Cal team in the national championship game, but Peterson's season was insane. Over 1,900 yards rushing and 15 touchdowns. This was his best season in college as teams quickly decided it was much easier to sell out against the run and stop him his sophomore season when he had Rhett Bomar as his quarterback. Then as a junior, he got hurt and missed the second half of the season, returning only to participate in what is the most memorable college football game I've ever seen. The Sooners lost to Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl. But Adrian still had what I would call a successful college career. He finished his career, again, just 2.5 seasons as Oklahoma's all-time leading rusher, and he was drafted 7th overall in 2006 before going on to have that NFL career that saw him win Rookie of the Year, MVP, set the single-game rushing record, and will most likely end with him being in the Hall of Fame. And yet, to me, he's still the other Adrian Peterson. I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, less than 15 minutes from the Citadel, right in the heart of SoCon football country. In the late 90s and early 2000s, the Southern Conference was dominated by Georgia Southern. The man who was the reason for much of that domination from 1998 to 2001, as you may have guessed, running back Adrian Peterson. Remember how the Rickies had similar stats when they played against each other? Well, the Adrians had similar freshman season stats. The Sooner version ran for 1,925 yards, and the Georgia Southern Adrian had 1,932 yards. Another cool coincidence is this was also his best regular season rushing performance, and he capped it off with a 1AA, or what is now known as an FCS title game loss, just like Oklahoma Adrian. However, while he wouldn't quite duplicate that freshman season production, he remained pretty damn close to it all 4 years, and along the way, he carried the Eagles to back-to-back national titles during the Cash Money Records reign of 1999 and 2000. During that 1999 season, he also became the first sophomore ever to win the Walter Payton Award, which is basically the 1AA version of the Heisman. This man absolutely dominated all 4 years. The most up-to-date record book I was able to find came out in 2022. Based on that, he remains the Division I all-time leading rusher with 6,559 career yards and holds the record for consecutive 100-yard games with 36. He's also the co-record holder for career rushing touchdowns by an FCS player. What's crazy is these records could be even more prolific. Georgia Southern did a lot of winning, as I said, which meant they spent a lot of time in the playoffs. During the postseason, Adrian's performances were even wilder. Over 15 career postseason games, pretty decent sample size, his rushing average jumped from an already absurd 156 yards per game to a basically unstoppable 173.5 yards per game. His 4-game run to the 1999 National Championship, he put up video game numbers. In the quarterfinals, despite being sick, he ran for 333 yards and 5 touchdowns. Then, in the national championship game against a Youngstown State team coached by future Ohio State coach Jim Tressel, he ran for 247 yards and 3 touchdowns. Over the course of that postseason run, he averaged 224 yards per game. This matters because these stats don't count towards his career total. If they did, he'd have 9,161 yards on the ground and 114 touchdowns. He never played more than 15 games in a season. Compare this to how the NCAA handles FBS stats now that they use a playoff format. Ohio State's national championship winning quarterback Will Howard is listed as being 5th in passing yards last season. He played in 16 games. The NCAA's official website recognizes his 4,010 yards over those 16 games as his total. This is true of all players on teams that made deep playoff runs last year. Why don't they recognize FCS playoff games, or hell, even bowl games from earlier FBS players like Ron Dane, but do for this current era when they play all these games? Just makes no sense. To me, what does make sense is to only count the regular season games across the board. Pro sports count stats separately like this, so I don't know why college doesn't, other than the NCAA is and has always been a mess. Regardless of what counts and what doesn't count, Georgia Southern's Adrian Peterson is a legend. He went on to be drafted 199th overall, that pick that Tom Brady made famous, by the Bears in 2002, just 2 years after Brady was drafted. Now, this Adrian wasn't as physically gifted as the version that would come along a couple years later. He ran just a 4.68 40 at the combine. His 1,283 career yards would have been the 7th highest single season total for Oklahoma Adrian, and his 8 career rushing touchdowns would have been the 9th best total for Oklahoma Adrian. But he did enjoy an 8-year NFL career. He started a couple of games, had a couple of 100-yard games, even threw a touchdown pass in the final game of the 2007 regular season. So he's the all-time leader in career touchdown passes among Adrian Petersons. Most importantly, I always made sure to try to acquire him when I played franchise mode in Madden. Now, as you may have guessed, the hallmark of this particular Sports World fun fact is a name that is somewhat common. The name Mike Davis certainly falls into that category. However, to up the degree of difficulty, let's talk about a couple of Mike Davises that were RB1 for the South Carolina Gamecocks. This is going to be wildly confusing, but the first Mike Davis showed up in Columbia the same year as legendary coach Steve Spurrier way back in 2005. The old ball coach was returning to college football after a brief hiatus that included a failed stint in the NFL as Washington's head coach. He took over the Gamecocks program from another legendary head coach in Lou Holtz, who I must remind you looked like the cartoon hound dog Droopy and spoke like Daffy Duck. Holtz had pulled the program out of the depths of a 21-game losing streak and turned South Carolina into a team that won 17 games over 2 seasons, including back-to-back Outback Bowl wins over Ohio State. But they quickly came back down to earth and became a team that was going to be fighting for bowl eligibility at the end of every season. Unfortunately for me, some things don't change. They were once again headed for a bowl game as they entered their 2004 matchup with Clemson. 2 days before that game, Holtz announced that he'd be retiring after the season. The end of the season came quicker than everyone expected when Clemson and South Carolina got into a brawl that led to neither team going to a bowl game as a self-imposed punishment. Fun fact, that brawl took place the day after the Malice at the Palace. In addition to the on-field brawl, those Holtz teams also had a fair share of off-the-field issues. Spurrier got to work cleaning this up, kicking players off the team, including star running back Demetrius Summers. Jordan Kay with the state newspaper just did a great series on Summers not too long ago. Please go read it. Demetrius was the hometown hero, essentially growing up right outside of Columbia in Lexington. How good was he? Every recruiting ranking I found had him as the number one running back of his class, ahead of Reggie Bush. He certainly showed flashes of that potential, but never reached it due to the troubles that led to Spurrier kicking him off the team. This also meant that the Spurrier era was going to start without a proven running back. Enter Mike Davis. He was a hometown kid like Summers, but without all of the baggage or national profile. However, he was talented enough to see time immediately, and he got better as the season went on. Over the final 4 games, he averaged just over 103 yards per game and finished the year as the Gamecocks' leading rusher with just under 700 yards on the ground and 5 touchdowns. After a couple of years of battling injuries and backing up Corey Boyd, he again led the team in rushing as a senior with 573 yards and 3 touchdowns. As the numbers suggest, he never really built on that promising freshman year. He was pretty much just always that guy, but he was what the Gamecocks needed and helped them build the foundation that would allow Spurrier to take the program to heights it has never seen before, hasn't seen since, and basically it kind of feels like we'll never see again. This included recruiting another South Carolina high school legend like Demetrius Summers. Marcus Lattimore was at the top of his recruiting class nationally, top 10 overall, and the only running back you would see ranked ahead of him was Michael Dyer. Right off the bat, he was being mentioned alongside Heisman winner George Rogers as one of the best running backs the program has ever seen. And he was one of the best running backs in the nation. He had absolute monster games of 182 yards against Georgia, 184 yards against Tennessee, 212 against Florida. He caught a touchdown and ran for 2 more in an upset of number 1 Alabama. And he finished his freshman season with 1,197 yards and 17 touchdowns on the ground. He was even better the next season. Through 6 games, he was averaging just under 130 yards per game and already had 9 rushing touchdowns. He was on pace for a 1,700-yard season. Unfortunately, he tore his ACL in that 7th game against Mississippi State. That injury was overshadowed by an even worse one he suffered the next season against Tennessee, which is still one of the most gruesome injuries I've ever seen. He hadn't looked quite like himself, but was still headed towards another 1,000-yard season. And again, the Mississippi State injury happened on October 15th, 2011, and he was ready to start the season on August 30th, 2012, which seemed like a miracle, and having some rust to knock off was not unexpected. The man was so ridiculous that even though I watched this injury live and it was absolutely brutal, I still expected him to come back. I mean, this was the best era of Gamecocks football in the midst of 3 straight 11-win seasons, and he had been the best player during it. Sadly, as we know now, that was the last time Marcus Lattimore played a game at South Carolina. The next game against Arkansas, a freshman from Stone Mountain, Georgia, took the field. If his brother had gotten his way, the second Mike Davis would have been on the wrong side of the Clemson-Carolina rivalry. Mike's brother James was a star running back for the Tigers, whose career paralleled that of the OG Mike Davis's. If this new Mike Davis had gotten his way, he would have been playing for his home state, Georgia Bulldogs. However, an offer never came his way. The Bulldogs instead went with Todd Gurley and Keith Marshall. Marshall influenced Davis's recruiting another time when Davis decommitted from Florida after claiming the Gators told him that they wouldn't be pursuing any more running backs in his class, but made a late push for Marshall. Florida and Georgia's loss was South Carolina's game. Davis had played sparingly throughout the season leading up to that point. He was behind a legend in Lattimore and senior Kenny Miles, who had taken over for the OG Mike Davis before Lat got there, but following Lattimore's injury, Davis received double-digit carries in 2 of the 4 games to end the season, and a new running back era was set to begin. The next season, in 2013, when South Carolina finished the year with the highest end-of-season AP ranking in school history at number 4, Davis was the new star running back. 7 100-yard games on the way to 1,183 yards on the season and 11 touchdowns on the ground, including a 149-yard performance in a tough loss to that Georgia team that snubbed him in recruiting. I legitimately believed that South Carolina was going to play for a national title during that season because I'm an idiot. And if not for a fluke loss to a mediocre Tennessee team, I may have been the world's smartest idiot. Despite losing stars like Jadeveon Clowney and Connor Shaw and even Lattimore deciding to enter the draft, the hype for the 2014 season was high with a number 9 ranking heading into the year. Little did I know it was about to be over as soon as it started. Quite literally, the home opener against Texas A&M was supposed to set the tone for an SEC title run at the very least. The Johnny Manziel era had just ended, and they were starting some kid by the name of Kenny Hill. I still have nightmares about Kenny Hill. He threw for 511 yards and 3 touchdowns as the Aggies drilled Carolina 52-28. This was the beginning of the end of the greatest era of Gamecock football of my life and probably ever. However, Davis had a respectable season. He battled injuries and got benched because he kept fumbling, but he just missed out on another 1,000-yard season, finishing with 982 yards. He declared for the draft after the season, probably seeing the writing on the wall about where the program was headed, and unlike the original Mike Davis, he was drafted. The 49ers selected him in the 4th round with the 126th pick in that 2015 NFL draft. He went on to play 8 seasons for 6 different teams as mostly a backup or a third-string running back. He did start 12 games in 2020 for the Panthers and 8 games the following year for the Falcons before retiring after spending the 2022 season with the Ravens. All right, that will do it for this episode of Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. Thank you for watching, listening, rating, subscribing, reviewing, and sharing. Let me know what you think of Beyond the Box Score. Also, don't forget to head over to the shownotes.beehive.com, sign up for my newsletter, weekly sports watch guide, screenshots. That's what we call it. It's awesome. You'll love it. Going to be very valuable as we move towards the end of NFL season into March Madness. The NBA season is about to start heating up. Unrivaled's going on. There's also other sports that I cover. You want to watch them. You just don't know it yet. So subscribe. Hope you are warm wherever you are. And yeah, I will catch you later.